A grieving millionaire hides in a quiet town hoping to disappear until a 6-year-old stranger asks for a hug that breaks him open. He came to escape, but what he found was something he never thought he deserved: love, family, and a second chance. One moment changed everything. Would you have said yes? If this emotional story finds you in the middle of your day or late into the night, we'd love to know. Where in the world are you watching from? Under the soft light of an early autumn morning, just past 9 o'clock, Jonathan Bernard stepped out of his car and into the steady hum of the Maplewood Artisan Fair. The town of Willow Creek stretched before him like a page from another life, simple, grounded, untouched by the noise he had once called success. Above him, the sky was an easy blue, wide and clean, as if it had never heard of concrete skylines or red-eye flights. The air was laced with the earthy aroma of turned soil, freshly brewed coffee, cinnamon from baked goods cooling on tables, and something that felt like memory, familiar but distant. Along the sidewalks, booths brimming with local crafts created a gentle maze. There were hand-woven quilts hanging like quiet declarations of comfort, carefully carved wooden toys displayed with pride, jars of pickles lined up like soldiers, and baskets of late-season tomatoes still glistening with dew. The fair pulsed with life, but not the kind Jonathan was used to. This was not ambition masked as movement. It was people choosing to be where they were. Laughter rose now and then from a fig jam vendor handing out crackers, pure and unhurried. And in the middle of it all, Jonathan, tall, composed, dressed in dark jeans and a slate button-down, walked slowly, not quite invisible, but certainly not of this place. Despite the casual attire, everything about him betrayed refinement. His clothes were pressed, his boots were spotless, his silver watch, discreet but unmistakably expensive, caught a flicker of sunlight. It wasn't vanity, it was habit. The kind honed over years in glass towers and private lounges. Vendors offered courteous nods, sensing a line that shouldn't be crossed. And that suited him. For nearly 12 months, he had been living in a home tucked high in the hills, a deliberate exile from the life that once devoured him. The world had called him a visionary, a genius, a billionaire by 29, and yet none of it stayed. None of it mattered after Claire. He walked past tables of beeswax candles and vintage postcards, pausing briefly at a booth that broke through his numbed routine. It stood modest but different. The journals drew his eyes first, hand-bound, their covers textured with soft fabrics and thick fibers, stitched in a way that suggested intention. Tiny ceramic dishes, glazed in soft green and dusky blue, were arranged with care, and above them, watercolors swayed gently in the breeze. Sunflowers, children playing, a modest home beneath a heart-shaped cloud. Behind it all, a woman moved with quiet purpose. Her apron was worn, her brown curls pulled back by a faded ribbon. Her hands were nimble, rearranging items with practiced rhythm. But it was her eyes, deep, watchful, slightly tired, that held the weight of someone who had given more than she could spare and still kept giving. Jonathan was about to pass when a small voice, startling in its clarity and closeness, interrupted his forward motion. "You look like someone who gives good hugs." He turned abruptly. A child, no more than 6 years old, stood beside him, hair a wild halo of dark curls. Her dress had a small tear near the hem, her sandals didn't match, but her eyes were wide and steady and saw straight through him. He blinked, caught off guard as if someone had reached into a place he didn't realize was still open. "I'm sorry?" he asked. "I don't want money," she said, calm and firm. "I just want a hug like a daughter gets." His breath caught. He didn't move. From the booth, the woman looked up sharply. She was already stepping around the table. "Dorothy," she said, voice low but urgent. "Sweetheart, we don't ask strangers for things." "It's okay," Jonathan said quickly, his voice low and unfamiliar even to himself. Something inside him had shifted in an instant, something old and long-sealed coming loose. He crouched to the child's level without thinking. "What did you say?" The girl shrugged, eyes never leaving his. "I see daddies hug their kids at the library and after school. It looks warm. I just wanted to know what that feels like." The woman, now beside them, crouched too. "Dorothy, we've talked about boundaries, baby. You can't ask people for hugs." "I know," Dorothy said softly, but he looked like someone who used to know how. Jonathan stared at her, stunned. She didn't blink. There was no manipulation, no performance. only truth. It wasn't something she was trying to sell. It was something she had noticed and said aloud because that's what children do when the world hasn't yet taught them to stay quiet. He stood slowly, not trusting his own voice. I should go. But he didn't. He just stood there, frozen in place. Sorry, the woman said gently, rising with her daughter. She slipped an arm around Dorothy's shoulder. She's not usually this forward. No, Jonathan replied, barely above a whisper. She's just brave. There was a pause, heavy and quiet. Then the woman extended a hand. Angela Harper. This is my daughter, Dorothy. We sell handmade goods here every Saturday. Jonathan Bernard, he said, shaking her hand. Her grip was firm but kind. Nice to meet you both. Dorothy had already returned to the booth, her small figure hunched over a sketch pad, pencils scratching in determined movements. Jonathan watched for a moment, then turned back to Angela. Her gaze stayed on him, not suspicious, not welcoming, but reading him, measuring something she hadn't yet decided on. You all right? She asked, and her voice carried something he hadn't heard in a long time, actual concern. Yeah, he said, lying out of habit. She didn't call him on it. She just nodded once and said, Well, if you ever need something to write in, we've got journals that might help. Something in her tone nearly made him smile. He nodded again, then walked away, the sound of the market growing louder in his ears as the colors around him seemed suddenly too sharp, the smells too rich, the world a little too real. Back in his car, he sat without turning the key. The door was open. The morning air touched his skin. He gripped the steering wheel and stared at nothing. Her voice echoed through him. I just want a hug, like a daughter gets. He had everything once, or what the world told him was everything. A multi-million-dollar startup before 30, magazine covers, conferences, a house that looked like it had been curated by people who never slept in it, wine cellars, infinity pools, high ceilings, empty halls. But he'd never held a child in that house. He had never even considered it. Emotional connection to him had always been a liability, a weakness, something that slowed you down in rooms where timing meant millions and hesitation meant failure. His sister Claire had been the opposite. She was the kind of person who showed up when you didn't know how to ask. She loved freely, fiercely, without calculation. She was the one who painted light into places that didn't deserve it. And when she died, when he paid for the hospital, the funeral, the flights, and left without saying goodbye to the baby that never made it, he told himself it was survival, one foot in front of the other. But today, a single sentence from a 6-year-old girl had cut through a year's worth of numbness like a knife. She didn't know who he was. She didn't care about stock options or scandals. She just saw something in him, a softness that used to exist. And for a moment, he felt it again. He closed his eyes and let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. And in the silence of the car, with the market still bustling behind him and the ghost of Claire's laughter somewhere in the distance, he knew this wasn't over. Something had started again, and it terrified him in the way only truth can. That night, in the quiet stillness of his home nestled in the hills above Willow Creek, Jonathan Bernard stood in front of a door he hadn't opened in nearly a year. The hallway around him was dim, the fading sunlight bleeding in through tall windows, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. He stood there for a moment, unmoving, just staring at the old brass doorknob. It was slightly tarnished now, a little colder than he remembered, but his hand reached for it anyway. His fingers hesitated only for a second before curling around the metal. He turned the knob slowly and pushed the door open. The art studio hadn't changed. The faint scent of cedar and turpentine still lingered in the air, as if the room had been holding its breath all this time. Dust hung in golden shafts of light, slicing through the narrow windows, making everything look softer, older. Jonathan stepped across the threshold with the cautious reverence of someone entering sacred ground. The floor creaked slightly under his weight. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The silence was thick, but not empty. It was watchful, filled with memory. At the center of the room stood Claire's easel, untouched. A smear of dried lavender paint clung stubbornly to the bottom rung. On the side table, her brushes lay exactly as she had left them, bristles stiff, hardened with time. A chipped coffee mug sat on the windowsill, half filled with dried pigment water. He hadn't moved it since the morning she drove herself to the hospital, never to return. His eyes lingered there for a long beat before moving across the space. The walls were lined with fragments of her life. Unfinished canvases leaned against each other like quiet conversations left hanging mid-sentence. Bluebirds taking flight, early sunrises breaking over empty fields, and a series of paintings she'd started about homes, quiet homes, as she called them, places that told stories without needing words. She used to say she could tell how loved a house was by how the light hit it. At the time, Jonathan had dismissed it as one of her poetic musings, but now, as he stood in the soft hush of her studio, he thought he finally understood. He moved toward one painting in particular. It was simple, almost sparse. A mother sitting beneath a tree, arms wrapped around a child, red leaves drifting gently to the ground around them. Their faces weren't visible, just the curve of bodies, the quiet pull of presence, of being held. Jonathan stared at it longer than he intended, something tightening behind his ribs. His hand reached out, and his fingers brushed the edge of the canvas. "I'm still here," he said, voice barely audible. "I just don't know what to do with it." The room didn't answer. It didn't need to. The silence inside those four walls had weight, but it wasn't cruel. It was patient. It waited for him to be ready. Downstairs, his phone buzzed across the kitchen counter, a low, persistent vibration and that broke the stillness, but didn't tempt him. He knew who it was. Probably Arthur again, his old business partner, still holding on to the idea that Jonathan could be pulled back into that world if the right moment came. "They're losing confidence," Arthur had said last week over the phone. "You need to show your face. Remind them you're still the mind behind the machine." Jonathan had listened quietly, offering nothing in return. He hadn't stepped into an office in over 12 months. He hadn't touched a line of code since Claire's funeral. The title, the reputation, the empire, it all meant nothing now. Not if it couldn't make space for a man whose world had cracked wide open. Let them lose confidence. Let them wonder. What kind of success is worth anything if it demands you disappear when grief comes knocking? He turned back to Claire's desk and picked up a pencil. The graphite flaked slightly as he rolled it between his fingers. His hand wasn't steady. He didn't expect it to be, but something in him urged forward. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to move. He reached for a clean sheet of sketch paper, one of the few untouched, in a stack near her chair, and placed it gently on the desk. He drew. The lines were uncertain at first, cautious, as if each stroke might be the wrong one. His hand didn't have the fluid confidence Claire's did. His movements were tight, restrained, but the shape began to take form. A child, small, curls wild and untamed, arms stretched wide, eyes open and unafraid. He paused, exhaling slowly. Next to the child, he began sketching another figure, tall, undefined, shoulders slightly hunched, the posture of someone unsure whether they belong. He stopped at the face. His pencil hovered there, suspended in hesitation. The paper waited. Jonathan stared at the space where the eyes should go. What kind of man, he wondered, would know how to stay when asked for something as simple and impossible as a hug? He didn't finish the drawing that night. He didn't need to. It wasn't about the perfection of the lines or the symmetry of features. It was about the truth behind them, the attempt, the reaching. He leaned back in Claire's old chair and closed his eyes. The scent of paint, wood, and old memories wrapped around him like a blanket woven from moments he thought he'd forgotten how to feel. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel numb. He felt fragile, present, alive. Upstairs, the light continued to fade. Outside, the hills settled into dusk. And inside the quiet studio, a man who had once built machines that changed the world sat in front of a simple sketch of a girl who had asked him for a hug. And, for the first time, he didn't look away. Later that week, Jonathan Bernard found himself once again at Old Mill Square. He told himself he was just out for a walk, needing fresh air and a stretch of the legs. But even as the thought passed through his mind, he knew it wasn't true. There was purpose in his steps, even if he couldn't name it yet. This time, he moved through the square differently, less like a distant observer and more like someone who didn't want to draw attention. He kept his hands tucked in his jacket pockets, shoulders slightly hunched, as if shrinking made it easier to come and go without stirring anything. The market was alive with late morning bustle. Dogs tugged on their leashes, their owners calling after them with amused frustration. A man sat near the corner cafe, strumming a worn guitar, singing something old and sweet under his breath. Children darted through the open walkways between vendor stalls, chasing each other with oversized maple leaves. It was noisy, warm, familiar, but not to him, not yet. He spotted the booth before he spotted them. Angela Harper stood behind the table, arranging a fresh row of hand-painted journals with practiced ease. Her movements were careful, but efficient, the way someone worked when they knew time was never fully on their side. Beside her, Dorothy sat cross-legged in a little folding chair, one knee tucked up, head bent over a sketch pad. Her brows were furrowed in concentration, lips pursed, pencil in constant motion. She looked up first. Recognition was immediate. A smile spread across her face, wide and sure, before she even said a word. "It's the Hug Man," she announced with joy, pointing at him with her pencil. Jonathan frozen. A few heads turned at the declaration, but it was Angela's reaction that held him still. She didn't smile. She didn't scowl either. Her face stayed unreadable, like she was trying to measure what kind of man came back again. Jonathan gave a small wave, almost uncertain, and walked toward them. "Hi," Dorothy said brightly, eyes sparkling. "I drew you." "You did?" His voice came out quieter than intended. She nodded and lifted her sketch pad with pride. On the page, drawn in thick pink crayon, were 3 figures, one tall and lanky, another smaller with curly hair, and a woman with big loops for curls. All 3 were holding hands beneath a smiling yellow sun that took up most of the top half of the page. Jonathan knelt down slowly so his eyes were level with hers. "I love the sun," he said softly. "It's warm, like hugs." Dorothy beamed. "That's what I thought." Angela cleared her throat gently. "Dorothy, why don't you go see if Ms. Layla has those sweet apple chips you like?" Dorothy looked up at her mom, then at Jonathan. "Can I show him the other drawings later?" "Sure, baby. Go ahead." Dorothy skipped off without hesitation, her sketch pad tucked under her arm. Jonathan stood as Angela crossed her arms loosely, still watching him. "She doesn't forget people easily," she said, not accusing, not inviting, just stating a fact. "I'm not sure I want her to," Jonathan replied honestly. Angela studied him for a long moment. "Most people who wear watches like yours don't come back here." Jonathan looked down at his wrist, then back up. "It was a gift. I haven't taken it off in years. Maybe I should." Her expression softened, just slightly, barely enough to notice. "Did you come back for something?" she asked. "I don't know," he said truthfully. "Maybe to buy a journal." Angela turned and picked up a journal from the table, a sky blue one with faint flecks of gold leaf worked into the cover. "This one's sturdy, bound by hand. Pages won't bleed if you're using ink." He took it gently from her, his fingertips brushing the textured spine. "You made it?" "Every stitch." "It's beautiful," he said. "Thank you." The silence that followed wasn't awkward, just full. Angela didn't rush to speak. Neither did he. The moment held itself, suspended. Finally, she broke it. "You seemed affected the other day." Jonathan glanced down at the journal, then met her eyes again. "She reminded me of someone." Angela's voice was quiet. "Your daughter?" "I don't have one." A flicker crossed her face. Was it caution or curiosity? She reached to adjust a ceramic tray on the corner of the table, an excuse to look away. "Well," she said finally, "Dorothy has a way of getting into people's hearts before they know what's happening. She's got a gift." He nodded slowly. "And gifts like that don't need to be taken away." Angela nodded back. The message between them didn't need to be repeated. It was clear. She wasn't just protecting her child. She was protecting what they had managed to build, a life with no promises from people who didn't plan on staying. Jonathan reached for his wallet. "I'll take the journal." She told him the price. He handed her a few bills, refused the change. As he turned to go, she spoke softly. "I'm not ungrateful. I just protect what's mine." Jonathan met her eyes. "I'd expect nothing less." He walked away with the journal pressed to his side, unsure why his chest felt tighter than before. Back in his car, he sat in the driver's seat with the door still open. He opened the journal to the first blank page. He ran his fingers over the thick paper for a moment, then picked up a pen and wrote, "Sometimes love shows up in places we don't expect and makes us wish we were better men." Outside, the sun inched higher in the sky. Behind him, a little girl with pink crayons was likely still drawing pictures of a life that hadn't happened yet. But maybe, just maybe, it still could. Angela hadn't planned to stay at the market that late, but the orders had come in all at once. 3 custom ceramic mugs, 2 new journals, a batch of lavender-dipped bookmarks for the upcoming festival. And she still hadn't even started the earrings Layla Smith had been pestering her about for weeks. The early evening had cooled, a steady signal that autumn was finally claiming the town. Angela rubbed the back of her neck while kneeling to organize a crate of stitched pouches beneath the table. Just beside the booth, Dorothy sat cross-legged on a faded quilt, coloring in silence, humming now and then without even realizing it. Angela glanced at her every few minutes. It was a habit she couldn't shake, not since the day she brought her daughter home alone from the hospital. "I brought sandwiches." And the voice made her jump, not from fear but from the warmth in its tone. She stood quickly and looked up. Layla Smith stood at the edge of the stall, her silver curls slipping loose from a colorful scarf tied with more style than structure. "I thought you'd be halfway home by now," Angela said, wiping her hands on a towel tucked in her apron. Layla gave a knowing smile. "And I thought you'd stop pretending you're not half-starved on Fridays." She handed Angela a brown paper bag. Turkey and cheddar, no tomato, just the way you like it. Angela couldn't help smiling. "Thank you." Layla didn't leave. She leaned casually against the corner post, eyes following the crowd. "That man came back," she said. Angela stilled, fingers tightening slightly on the sandwich bag. Layla didn't press. "Tall," she continued, "clean-shaven, sharp jaw, sad eyes." "His name's Jonathan," Angela said, her voice calm, maybe too calm. "He asked about the journals." Layla raised an eyebrow. "And what did you tell him?" Angela shrugged. "That they don't write themselves." The quiet that followed wasn't strained, but it carried meaning. "You think he's trouble?" Layla asked. Angela didn't answer right away. She picked up a ceramic bowl and began gently polishing the glaze. "I think he's trying," she said finally. "Trying what?" "To figure out if he belongs here." Layla made a soft sound in her throat, thoughtful but unsurprised. "Men like him don't just stumble into places like this." Angela met her eyes. "He doesn't feel like someone trying to buy something." "No," Layla said. "He feels like someone trying to come back from something." Angela looked down. "Dorothy adores him," she admitted. "She drew a picture of the three of us yesterday." Layla didn't say anything for a beat. Then, in a tone both gentle and firm, she said, "That child has a way of seeing what others can't." They looked over together. Dorothy had fallen asleep on the quilt, crayon still in her hand, a soft exhale parting her lips. Angela's heart squeezed, as it always did when she saw her daughter completely at peace. Layla placed a hand on Angela's arm. "You know I love you." Angela nodded silently. "Then you know I say this with care," Layla continued. "Sometimes you build your walls so high you forget you're the one trapped behind them." Angela felt a knot tighten in her throat. "He's not. This isn't," she began, then stopped. "I'm not saying you owe him anything," Layla said gently, "but maybe let the man stand on the porch before you assume he's here to knock the whole house down." Here is the rewritten version in natural, emotionally grounded American English prose, tailored for a YouTube voiceover aimed at emotionally aware Western audiences aged 50 to 70. That night, Angela Harper stayed at the kitchen table long after Dorothy had gone to bed. The apartment above the bookstore groaned every time the wind shifted outside. It wasn't much: 2 bedrooms, a narrow galley kitchen, and an old porcelain sink that whined every time she turned the faucet. But it was home. It was where Dorothy had taken her first steps, where Angela once wept quietly in the dark after turning down a well-paying job because the cost of daycare would have wiped it all out. She sat tracing the rim of her teacup with one finger, steam still curled into the air. Her thoughts drifted, uninvited, back to Jonathan Bernard. How still he'd been, how he didn't fill silence with charm or small talk. He hadn't worn his pain like armor. There was something in the way he looked at Dorothy. Not pity, not performance. It was recognition. Her phone buzzed beside her. A message from Steve. "How's your day? Still need help with the kiln tomorrow?" A faint smile touched her lips. "Yeah, 9 a.m. Bring coffee or I'm sending you back." She stared at the screen, then typed another line. "And maybe help me move the glazes." Thinking of trying something softer, more warmth. The next morning came with a crisp breeze and the smell of damp leaves clinging to everything. Steve showed up wearing a sweatshirt at least 3 sizes too big and carrying a cardboard tray with 2 lattes and a muffin squashed into the corner. "I brought peace offerings," he said, setting the tray on the counter. Angela smiled without looking up. Bribery accepted. They slipped into an easy rhythm, sorting shelves, checking the kiln, brushing off dusty brushes and jars. It wasn't until they took a break that Steve spoke up. "You've been different this week." She glanced over. "Different how?" "Not bad different, just quiet, like your head's somewhere else. You keep spacing out. Angela unwrapped the muffin slowly. You ever meet someone and feel like they remember something you forgot? He blinked. Like déjà vu. She shook her head. Not quite, more like they see a version of you used to be, or maybe one you still want to be. Steve took a slow sip of his coffee. You're talking about the guy Dorothy hugged. Angela let out a short breath of laughter. That's what she calls him. I saw him the other day, Steve said. Quiet type, real still. He leaned back in the folding chair. Do you trust him? Angela hesitated. I don't. Not trust him. Steve nodded slowly. You just don't trust your heart to want something that might leave again. The words hit harder than she expected. She didn't answer. Sorry. He softened his voice. All I'm saying is just because you built something with one set of bricks doesn't mean you can't build again. With different hands. That afternoon, Angela walked through the weekend market with Dorothy's hand in hers. Her daughter chattered away about a storybook she wanted to make, with talking animals and glitter on the pages. Angela let her talk, the words washing over her as background. And then she saw him, Jonathan, standing near Layla Smith's flower cart, holding a small pot of marigolds in both hands like he didn't quite know what to do with them. He looked awkward, a little out of place, but he also looked honest, not trying too hard, just standing there, fully himself. He saw her too, their eyes locked, not in greeting, not in hesitation, just seeing each other. Dorothy tugged on her hand. Can we say hi? Angela didn't answer right away. Then she nodded. Just for a minute. They walked over. Jonathan straightened when they got close. Hi, he said, offering a small smile. Didn't realize marigolds required this much decision-making. Angela glanced at the plant. They're tougher than they look. Seems appropriate, he said quietly. Dorothy had already wandered to the cart, eyes lighting up. That one looks like sunshine, she said, pointing to the brightest bloom. Jonathan bent down. Then maybe it's meant for you. He handed it to her gently, and she cradled it like something precious. Angela watched them. Her guard was still up, but her heart, for the first time in a long while, leaned forward, just a little. Saturday morning arrived early. Jonathan stood at the market well before the crowd. He held a coffee cup and waited near a booth, still half-draped in a blue tarp. Vendors shuffled by, setting up jars of jam and baskets of fruit, their voices rising with the sun. He hadn't planned to come this early. He just hadn't been able to sleep. The image of Dorothy holding the marigold had stayed with him all night. He wandered, trying not to look like he was searching. But he was. Angela's booth wasn't fully set up yet. He saw the folding table, a stack of crates, and a wooden sign swinging slightly in the breeze. Harper and Daughter. He stared at it longer than he meant to. The name tugged at something in him. Then came the sound of small feet. Dorothy came skipping up the path, a folded cloth in one hand and a tiny rolling suitcase in the other. She wore a yellow sweater that hung off her shoulders and had a single braid over one side. You came early, she said, grinning. He smiled. Couldn't sleep. Me neither, she beamed. I dreamed my marigold got big enough to sit under. That's a pretty great dream. She motioned for him to follow. Come help me set the table. Mommy's still getting tea from Ms. Layla. He hesitated. You sure that's okay? She shrugged. You're probably harmless. That means you can carry stuff. He laughed. That's comforting. They unpacked the bag together. Handmade journals, bowls of beads, fresh bookmarks pressed with petals. Dorothy handed him a cloth. We clean the table before the pretty stuff goes on. Always. He followed her lead, wiping down the surface in careful circles. It surprised him how easily comfort settled in when no one tried to force it. He was just stacking the journals when Angela appeared. She froze for a second, taking in the scene. Jonathan crouched beside her daughter, gently wiping down the table like he'd done it before. Her eyes narrowed. Not cold, just careful. You volunteering now? She asked. Jonathan stood. I was told I'm probably harmless. She shook her head, suppressing a smile. Remind me to thank Layla for that glowing endorsement. He reached into a bag. I brought you something. Cinnamon bread. Still warm. Her eyebrow lifted, but she took it. Thanks. You're welcome. The moment stretched. The silence not exactly comfortable, but not tense either. Then Dorothy interrupted. Mommy, can we show him the new story? Angela looked at her. Which one? The one with the 3 houses. I finished it last night. Dorothy pulled out a small handmade booklet held together with purple yarn. On the cover, a crayon drawing of 3 houses. Inside, short lines with matching pictures. "This is the house that's always too loud," she read, pointing to the first. "It has shouting and the lights blink a lot." She turned the page. "This is the house that's always too quiet. It has clean floors but no laughter." Then the last page. "And this one, this is the house where hugs live. It smells like cinnamon and drawing markers." She looked up, serious. "Which one do you think we'll live in someday?" Angela's breath caught. Jonathan didn't look away. "I hope it's that last one," he said gently. "It will be," Dorothy said, "maybe even with a porch swing." Angela laughed to cover the sting in her eyes. "All right, storyteller, let's get this booth open." Dorothy skipped off to arrange the bookmarks. Jonathan watched her go, then looked back at Angela. "She's got something rare." "She always has," Angela said softly. "Even when I had nothing to give her, she had that." A pause stretched out. Something unspoken hung between them. "I wasn't always this," Angela said, gesturing to the booth. "I used to teach full-time. Art classes, big classrooms. I thought I'd be illustrating children's books by now." "What changed?" "Dorothy," she said without hesitation. "She came early. I came home. It wasn't a decision, it was just change." Jonathan nodded. "Change doesn't ask." "No," she said, "but it tells you what matters." A gust of wind lifted the edge of the tablecloth. They both reached for it. Their hands brushed. She pulled away. He didn't push. The market grew louder as the morning stretched. Music from a nearby booth. The smell of roasted nuts in the air. People talking and laughing. Later, when things had slowed down, Layla walked over with 2 cups of tea. "Thought you could use this," she told Angela. Then she looked at Jonathan. "And you probably need something stronger, but this'll do." Jonathan smiled. "You always this good at matchmaking?" "I'm good at spotting people who don't fit in crowds," Layla said, and walked away. Jonathan looked at Angela. "She's always like that. She's better than most therapists I've met." They sipped tea together in silence for a while. Then Angela asked, "Why do you come back?" Jonathan looked right at her. "Because this is the only place where I don't feel like I'm pretending." She didn't answer right away. Then she handed him a small bracelet made of thread and glass beads. "We barter with kindness around here. You helped today. That counts." He nodded, accepting it. "Thank you." As he turned to leave, Dorothy ran up and slipped a folded paper into his hand. "It's a map," she whispered, "to the Hug House." He opened it. 3 stick figures in front of a house with a porch swing and a giant red heart. "Is it real?" he asked. "It's real when somebody stays," she said, and ran back to her mother. Jonathan stood there a moment longer, holding a map to something he wasn't sure he deserved, but suddenly wanted more than anything. Jonathan Bernard stood in front of the mirror longer than he meant to. It was just a Sunday lunch, nothing fancy. An easy, unplanned gathering behind the market. Someone had set up a grill. Others brought folding chairs and paper plates. No formality, no pressure. Still, he'd changed his shirt 3 times. He finally settled on a soft, deep gray pullover, simple, not too polished, not trying to say anything. Over it, he pulled on a denim jacket, noticed the fray at the cuffs for the first time. That small imperfection felt right. Let them see he was just a man. Let them see he didn't have it all together. The drive into town was short. The trees lining the road had started shifting into fall, flashes of red, orange, yellow, scattered through the green. Willow Creek always knew how to ease into change. Jonathan wished he could say the same about himself. He parked a block away and walked the rest, hands tucked into his pockets, scanning quietly for the alley space Layla had mentioned. The air carried the sounds of life. Distant laughter, something sizzling on a burner, a baby crying a few stalls over. And then he saw her. Angela Harper stood at a folding table, lifting her hair into a loose bun. The shoulder of her sweater had slipped down, revealing a thin strap and, just beneath it, a small tattoo he hadn't seen before. 2 birds mid-flight, inked in a way that felt almost weightless. Dorothy sat nearby, legs swinging as she picked through a bowl of strawberries, giggling at something Layla had said. Jonathan stopped just for a second and let the moment land. This wasn't his world, not really, but something in it settled into his chest, warm and heavy, like memory. "Hey!" Dorothy spotted him first. She waved a strawberry through the air like a tiny flag. You made it. He smiled, walking toward them. Wouldn't miss it. Angela turned, surprised, but not in a way that made him regret showing up. You found us. Layla left breadcrumbs. Layla raised her cup. The secret's always in the lemonade. There were no formal introductions, no stiff silence, just room, a quiet, unspoken welcome that didn't need explaining. Jonathan sat next to Angela while plates were passed around. Grilled flatbreads, sliced peaches, some kind of chilled bean salad. People told stories about broken printers, nosy neighbors, school projects, and which store had the best vinegar. It was ordinary, and it was beautiful. He watched Angela talk to a vendor about clay orders, her hands moving with intention, her brow creasing just slightly when she concentrated. She wasn't trying to prove anything. That made her unforgettable. You're quiet, she said, catching him watching. Just observing. Careful, she warned. You hang around too long, we'll make you help clean up. He smiled. I'm not afraid of dirty dishes. She looked at him a moment longer than necessary. Some people are afraid of small things. They just call it something else. He didn't have a reply. Not yet. Before he could search for one, Layla's voice rose over the low chatter. All right, folks, I've got a question, she called out. What's the one thing you didn't know you needed until you had it? Dorothy leaned into Angela, whispering something. Jonathan caught enough to understand. Can I answer? Angela nodded. Dorothy stood, wobbling a little on the bench. A hug that stays. For a moment, no one spoke. It wasn't silence out of discomfort. It was reverence, like the words had landed in everyone's chest at once and needed a breath to settle. Layla finally smiled. Hard to top that one, kid. Soft laughter followed, and the conversation moved forward, but Angela's hand now rested on the edge of the table, fingers lightly touching the surface. She wasn't reaching for anything, but she wasn't pulling back either. After lunch, people started packing up. Chairs folded, plates stacked. The light had shifted, sunlight filtered through the alley trees in patches, making the whole space feel like something already remembered. Angela folded a blanket, looking over at him. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure if I should. Why not? Didn't want to disrupt anything. She paused, eyes steady. You didn't. You just added something. There was that moment again, soft, uncertain, but open. Can I ask you something? She said, her voice quieter now. Of course. Why her? Why Dorothy? He didn't answer right away. Then, she saw me, really saw me, and she didn't flinch. Angela looked down and nodded slowly. She does that. I don't think I realized how much I needed it until it happened. She tucked the blanket under one arm. She draws pictures of you, you know. His heart kicked. She does? She hasn't drawn anyone but the two of us in years, always just me and her. But now you're there, holding her hand. Sometimes there's a porch, sometimes a swing, sometimes just sunlight. He took a breath. Is that okay? Angela looked away toward the trees. It scares me. He stepped a little closer. Because she's getting attached? She shook her head. Because I am. The words came out small, honest, a little frayed around the edges. He didn't speak. He just stayed with her in that space. I don't want to need someone who won't stay, she said quietly. I don't know what I'm doing, he admitted, but I keep coming back because this feels real, and I don't remember the last time something felt like that. She looked at him again, fully this time, and for once the guardedness in her eyes softened. Not gone, but gentler. The beginning of something different. A few feet away, Dorothy called out, Mommy, Mr. Warm, look at this leaf. It's red like a fire truck. They both turned toward her, and for that 1 second, everything was still. Jonathan didn't reach for Angela's hand. He didn't have to. He was already holding something more fragile. Hope. Rain tapped softly against the windows of the studio. Jonathan stood in front of the easel, staring at a blank canvas. He'd taken it out hours ago, prepped it, lined up the brushes just like Claire used to, thin to thick, soft to firm, each one resting just off the edge of the table, never quite touching, but the canvas stayed white, untouched. The idea of starting again pulled tight in his chest. It had been more than 4 years. Not since the funeral, not since the house went still in ways he hadn't thought possible. But now the quiet no longer felt like peace. It felt like something unfinished, like a room waiting for life again. He looked down at the sketch pad on the bench beside him. Dorothy's map. 3 stick figures, one tall, one medium, one small. a porch swing, a red heart drawn over the roof like a roof of its own. He didn't know what it meant to deserve something like that, but maybe that wasn't the point. Maybe all you had to do was keep showing up. The next morning, the rain had passed, leaving the air cool and clean. The scent of wet leaves clung to the sidewalks, mixed with cinnamon drifting over from the bakery 2 blocks down. Jonathan Bernard stood at the edge of the market's main square, holding a warm paper bag in one hand and a coffee in the other. Inside the bag were 2 almond croissants. He remembered Angela mentioning them once, saying she missed the ones from her old neighborhood cafe. It wasn't a big gesture, but he'd learned those were the ones that counted. He didn't see her right away. Her booth was set up, table covered, bins in place, but the space behind it was empty. Dorothy was there, though, perched on a low stool, her face scrunched in focus as she threaded bookmarks into a garland of twine. Her tongue poked out at the corner of her mouth. When she looked up and spotted him, her whole expression lit up. "You came," he smiled. "I brought you something sweet," he said, offering the bag. She took a croissant and held it up to her nose, smelling it like it was a flower. "Mommy's getting glaze from the pottery lady. She said she'd be right back." "Mind if I wait?" Dorothy pointed to a wooden stool off to the side. "That one's the guest seat." "I'm honored." They worked side by side for a few minutes, letting the market noise fill the quiet between them. Laughter rose and fell in the distance. The low hum of conversation drifted by as people passed. Then, in a soft, almost casual voice, Dorothy asked, "Do you have a mommy?" Jonathan looked up. "I did. She passed when I was little." "Oh," she said, thoughtful for a moment. "Like my grandpa. I never met him." He nodded gently. "That's the hard part, isn't it? Missing someone you never got to know." Dorothy's voice dropped to a whisper. "Sometimes I wonder if my dad would have liked my drawings." Jonathan swallowed. "I bet he would have loved them." She smiled a little, but kept her eyes down. Then suddenly, "You draw." "I used to. Will you show me sometime?" He paused, caught off guard by the question. "Maybe," he said slowly, "if you promise not to laugh at how out of practice I am." "I only laugh when things are funny, not when they're trying." Angela's voice cut gently through the moment. "That sounds like wisdom I haven't taught you yet." She stood a few feet away, arms loosely crossed, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Her curls were pulled back with a red scarf. There were faint clay smudges on the sleeves of her jacket. "She's teaching me," Jonathan said, standing up. Angela tilted her head. "I'm starting to think she's teaching both of us." He held out the second croissant. "You mentioned these once." She blinked. "You remembered." "I remember things that matter." The air shifted, not with tension, but with something quieter, like a question neither of them had asked aloud. Angela looked away first, reaching into one of the bins behind her. "I wanted to show you something." She pulled out a ceramic mug, the glaze running in soft waves of browns and deep blues. There was a slight indent along one side, just big enough for a thumb to rest. An intentional detail, the kind that came from knowing how someone would hold it. "I made this yesterday," she said. "Don't know why. Just had you in my head." Jonathan took it in both hands, turning it slowly. "It's beautiful." "It's quiet," she said, "but strong." Their eyes met. Neither spoke, but something moved between them, solid and gentle. Recognition, maybe even belonging. "I've been painting again," Jonathan said quietly. Angela blinked. "You are?" He nodded. "Last night. First time in years." "What did you paint?" He took a breath. "A house. 3 figures, one tall, one medium, one small." Her lips parted, but she didn't say anything. "I wasn't sure if I should tell you," he added. "Didn't want it to feel like pressure." She shook her head. "It doesn't." He waited. "It feels like hope," she said. A gust of wind swept a few dry leaves across the pavement. Somewhere behind them, a guitar strummed a slow melody. Angela stepped a little closer. "You know," she said, "sometimes when I'm working with clay, I don't know what I'm making. I just follow the wheel. Trust the shape will come." Jonathan looked at her. "What if it doesn't?" "Then I start over, but most of the time, it becomes something I didn't expect. Something better." Jonathan smiled. It was quiet and real. "I'm not good at trusting the shape." "You're learning," she said. "So am I." Just then Dorothy ran over, clutching a small stack of flower-pressed cards. "Ms. Layla said I could give you these." She passed them out with both hands like invitations to something special. Jonathan bent down to take his. She leaned in. "I'm glad you're staying." He looked up at Angela. She met his gaze. "I'm glad too," she said. And in that moment, surrounded by petals and the scent of cinnamon, with the market humming around them, something settled. Not love, not yet, but the beginning of something rooted. Later that night, it was the roof again. A slow, persistent drip just outside Dorothy's room. The kind of sound that waited until after dark to make itself known. Angela stood barefoot on a stool, pressing a folded towel against the ceiling. Rain tapped steadily against the windows, and wind pushed at the edges of the house. Thunder rolled faintly in the distance. She exhaled and climbed down, already feeling the towel soak through. It would hold a few hours, but not all night. The flashing needed proper repair. She'd patched it twice, but the skies over Willow Creek never made anything temporary last long. "Mommy?" Dorothy's voice was small. "I'm here, baby." Angela walked into the room, brushing wet strands of hair off her forehead. "Just checking the drip." Dorothy sat up, sleepy-eyed, clinging to her stuffed frog. "It's loud tonight." Angela climbed into bed beside her and pulled the blanket up. "Just the clouds doing a little dancing." Dorothy yawned. "Are they happy or sad?" Angela paused. "Maybe both." A flash of lightning filled the ceiling with light for a second. Then a low, steady rumble followed. Dorothy reached for her mother's hand and found it waiting. "You're safe," Angela whispered. "I promise." Then came a knock. Not loud, not rushed, just there. Angela hesitated. She kissed Dorothy's forehead, slipped off the bed, and padded to the front door. When she opened it, Jonathan stood in the rain, soaked through, holding a black toolbox in one hand and a rolled tarp in the other. "You said the roof had a soft spot," he said. "I saw the forecast. Thought maybe it couldn't wait." Angela stared at him, not angry, just caught between surprise and disbelief. "You came all the way out here in this?" He shrugged. "I've driven through worse. Besides, your coffee's better than the gas station's." She stepped aside. No words, just room. And when he walked inside, the house felt less worn somehow, less alone. "I'll check the attic," he said, already moving down the hallway like he remembered it. "That's where it started last time, right?" "Yeah, left side, above the linen closet." Dorothy peeked out of her room, half asleep but smiling. "Mr. Warm!" Jonathan glanced back. "Hey, superstar, you fixing our roof?" "I'm giving it a polite talking to." She giggled and ducked back under her blanket. Up in the attic crawl space, he worked without talking. Angela stood below, watching the flashlight flicker through the cracks in the boards, dust swirling in the beam. "I should have fixed this weeks ago," she said softly. "You've been fixing everything else." "That's not the same as failing." He didn't reply. After a while, he climbed down. His shirt was damp with sweat and rain. "It's not perfect," he said, "but it'll hold." Angela nodded. "Thank you." He leaned back against the wall, catching his breath. "I never liked storms growing up." "Why?" "Too many unknowns. You never knew what was worse, the thunder or the silence after." Angela tilted her head. "Silence doesn't sound so bad." "It is," he said, "when it means no one's coming." She met his eyes. Something flickered, familiar and deep. "You okay?" she asked. "I don't know." His voice was rough at the edges. "I keep showing up because it feels like I'm supposed to. Like this place, you and Dorothy, it's not something I'm meant to admire from outside." She took a step closer. "But I'm scared," he said, "that I'll want it too much, that I'll break it, that I'll stay and somehow still hurt something." "You're not hurting anything," she said. "You're waking up things I thought were gone." Then she reached out, touched his arm, light and sure. "That's not hurting," she whispered. "That's healing." He closed his eyes just for a moment. When he opened them, the room felt warmer, closer. "I'm sorry I didn't bring the right tools," he said, trying to shift the mood. "You brought yourself." He looked at her. "You should stay," she said. "Not forever, just tonight, until the storm passes." He nodded. "Okay." Later they sat at the kitchen table. The kettle hissed quietly on the stove. Rain tapped steady on the glass. Angela handed him a mug. Their fingers brushed. "You always show up when it matters most," she said. He didn't answer. He didn't need to, because in that small kitchen, with storm light flickering across chipped countertops, they both understood something important. Sometimes love doesn't arrive with a grand gesture. Sometimes it just knocks in the rain. By morning, the storm had passed. The world outside looked rinsed clean, air heavy with the scent of wet earth and pine, the kind of quiet that follows a long night of rain. Sunlight filtered through the kitchen window in soft streaks, painting gold across the countertop. Jonathan Bernard sat in the same chair he'd occupied the night before, both hands wrapped around a mug Angela had given him. The ceramic still held a little warmth. So did the gesture. Out the window, the backyard remained half-shadowed but alive. Birds flickering from branch to branch, damp leaves glistening in the early light. Somewhere down the hall, he could hear Dorothy singing softly to herself. The melody was wordless, a child's kind of music, part lullaby, part imagination. Angela moved through the kitchen without ceremony. Her feet were bare. Her hair was still loose from sleep. There was nothing put on. No performance in her presence, just quiet ease. She wasn't dressing the morning in effort. She just existed inside it. And maybe that was what made it feel so real. "You sleep okay?" she asked, glancing over her shoulder as she poured coffee into her own mug. Jonathan nodded. "Better than I thought I would." "Dorothy wanted to let you sleep in," she said, a slight grin on her lips. "She said she didn't want to startle the hug out of you too early." He laughed under his breath. "That kid's a walking poem." "She is." Angela slid a plate toward him. Toast, scrambled eggs, a few slices of strawberry arranged into a heart. He stared at it a second, a small smile slowly forming. "She do this?" Angela nodded, her voice gentle. "Every Saturday breakfast has to have a shape. She says it helps the food remember you." He shook his head, smiling for real now. "Then I better do my part, and remember the food, too." They ate quietly, a kind of silence that felt comfortable, not empty, just full of things not needing to be said. Then Angela spoke. "Do you miss your old life?" Jonathan set his fork down, took a breath. "Sometimes, but not the way people probably think." "How do you mean?" "I don't miss the boardrooms or the conferences, not the speeches, the photo ops, or the little name plaques with titles." He leaned back, gaze turning toward the window again. "I miss who I thought I was becoming. The man I was trying to be before everything got tangled up in ego and speed." Angela stayed quiet. "I built something that looked big," he said, "but somewhere in it, I forgot how to build something good." She looked at him, eyes steady. "And now," he added, "I think I'm starting to remember, but it feels like learning how to breathe a whole different way." Angela looked down at her coffee. Her fingers tapped once on the rim of the cup. "I know that feeling," she said. "I used to believe my worth came from what I could produce, how many students I could reach, how much art I could sell, what I could show the world." She paused, voice softer now. "Then Dorothy came, and she showed me that love doesn't care about output. It cares if you show up, every single day." Jonathan watched her closely. "Some days," she continued, "I still wonder if I'm enough. If being present is really all she needs." "You are," he said without even thinking. "You are so much more than enough." The words landed not as praise, but as truth. Angela exhaled slowly, like something inside her loosened. A knock came at the door. Light. Familiar. Angela opened it to find Layla Smith standing there, holding a bundle of herbs in one hand and wearing that skeptical, knowing look she did so well. "Well, well," she said, peeking past Angela. "Looks like you survived the thunder." Jonathan stood, rubbing the back of his neck. "I stayed in case the roof didn't." Layla handed Angela the herbs. "For the leak. Lavender and mint. That way it'll smell like you meant for it to rain." Angela laughed, placing the bundle in a glass jar near the sink. "Thank you." And Layla didn't leave right away. She gave them both a look. Not judgmental, just perceptive. "You two are walking a tightrope." Angela raised an eyebrow. "Layla." "I'm just saying," Layla said, pulling a small tin of cookies from her coat pocket. "Someone's gonna have to trust the net soon. Otherwise, you'll keep wobbling." And with that, she turned and left, her coat brushing the doorframe like punctuation on a sentence they hadn't finished reading. Later that afternoon, Jonathan stood back in his studio. The canvas from earlier in the week was still on the easel. He hadn't touched it since sketching the house. Just the outline, just the shape. Today, he added color. Soft yellow for the porch light. A pale green for the grass, a faint stretch of sky, almost blue. Each stroke was careful, deliberate, like he was letting the image build itself as much as painting it. And when he stepped back, something had changed. Not just the image, but the way it felt. There was warmth in it now. That evening, his phone rang. The number wasn't familiar. He picked up. "Hello." The voice on the other end was clipped, professional. "Mr. Bernard, this is Valerie Hayes with the Willow Creek Children's Art Foundation. Angela Harper listed you as a secondary contact for Dorothy's application." He blinked. "I'm sorry, she listed me as what?" "I'm calling to confirm Dorothy's placement in our fall mentorship program. Her drawings were submitted during the vendor showcase last week. Our committee noticed her work." Jonathan sat down. "That's incredible. She listed you under support system. Just confirming that's accurate." He didn't speak for a second. Then, quietly but firmly, "Yes, it is." After he hung up, he sat in the silence for a long while. Support system. The words echoed inside him, a quiet kind of heartbeat. That night, there was no storm, no emergency. Still, Jonathan knocked on Angela's door again, this time holding a printout of the foundation's email and a small canvas in his other hand. Angela opened the door. Before she could speak, he held both items up. She got in. Angela stared. "What?" "The mentorship program. Dorothy. They saw her work. And she's in, Angela. She's really in." Her hand came to her mouth, eyes instantly brimming. He handed her the canvas, the same house as before, but now there was a porch swing, a little girl on it, a soft glow from the porch light. "I wanted you to see what I see," he said, before I ever figured out how to say it. Angela looked at him, then down at the canvas, then back again. She reached out slowly and pulled him into a hug. No hesitation, no holding back. It wasn't about romance, it was something deeper. This time, he didn't feel like someone invited in from the cold. He felt like someone who had come home. The morning after Dorothy's acceptance felt like the kind of celebration no one had planned, but everyone had somehow shown up for anyway. At the market, vendors dropped by Angela's booth one by one, each carrying something small but thoughtful. A basket of scented erasers from the stationery stand, a hand-sewn apron with tiny paintbrushes embroidered along the hem, a watercolor postcard edged in gold with the words "Little Artist" written in delicate script across the top. Beneath it, just 4 words. "For Dorothy, keep making magic." Dorothy beamed at every gift like it was priceless, clutching them to her chest before darting off again, unable to contain her joy for more than a few seconds at a time. She bounced in and out from behind the booth, too full of excitement to sit still. Her cheeks were flushed pink, her smile wide and constant. Angela tried to keep the booth running, taking payments, answering questions, organizing supplies, but her focus was scattered. Something had shifted inside her, something bright, something warm. And it wasn't just pride in her daughter's success. It was more personal, more unexpected. It was the feeling of a door opening somewhere in her chest and not being afraid of what was on the other side. And Jonathan, he showed up like he always did now. But something about him was different too. Not bigger, not louder, just more present. This time he didn't arrive quietly with coffee in hand. He showed up holding a small thermal box, grinning like he'd just pulled off something important. "Dorothy said, 'Art deserves good shapes,'" he announced, sliding the box onto the table. "So I brought pancakes shaped like stars and hearts. I'm just following instructions." Angela raised an eyebrow, but her laugh came easy. "You made these?" He lifted a hand. "I bribed a cafe chef, but I supervised the geometry." She looked at him, really looked. "You're good at this." "At pancakes?" he teased. "No, at this." Her voice didn't rise, but her eyes held the weight of what she meant. Jonathan turned slightly, his gaze drifting toward the street where the morning sun filtered through trees, already starting to turn. Laughter carried down the lane. Booths bustled with chatter, and leaves crunched beneath the feet of passing customers. "I don't know exactly what this is yet," he said, "but it's the only thing I want to get right." The words didn't land dramatically. They landed quietly, fully, like they belonged. Before either of them could speak again, a voice broke through the space between them. "Jonathan?" He turned. A woman stood a few feet away. She was tall, polished, her chestnut brown hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, business casual, pressed trousers, blazer, the kind of confidence that arrived 5 minutes early and left before being dismissed. Angela instinctively stepped back half an inch, the shift almost imperceptible. The woman stepped closer. "I can't believe this. You're really here." Jonathan blinked. "Valerie," She nodded, smile bright. Wow, it's been what, 2 years, 3? He straightened slightly, polite but guarded. Closer to 4, probably. Valerie looked around the market. I thought you'd moved to Europe. You were heading some think tank in Oslo last I heard. I came back. Needed space, found it here. She laughed, not cruelly but with a kind of distance. I always pictured you in a Manhattan townhouse, or at least a cottage on the coast. I figured I'd try somewhere people still wave to each other. Valerie's eyes flicked toward Angela, then back to Jonathan. Old friend, she asked, lightly gesturing. Before he could answer, Angela extended her hand. Angela Harper, Dorothy's mom. Valerie's expression shifted, nothing overt, but something changed in her eyes. Not rude exactly, just a note of subtle dismissal, masked under a courteous smile. Ah, got it. Angela didn't flinch. She didn't shrink. But her smile dimmed slightly, her back straightened. Valerie turned back to Jonathan. I'm in town for a pediatric conference. Thought I'd stop by the market before the last panel. Can't believe I ran into you. Small world, Jonathan said, his voice more careful now. Well, it was great seeing you. She reached out, touched his arm briefly, casually, like she'd done it 100 times before. If you're ever back in the city, let's grab coffee. Jonathan didn't offer anything back. He just nodded. And then she was gone, fading into the crowd like someone who had shown up in a dream and left before you could ask why. Angela didn't say a word. Jonathan turned toward her, opened his mouth to explain, but the words scattered before they formed. That was unexpected, he said. Angela's voice was calm but cool. Friend, we dated, he said, a lifetime ago. Angela started rearranging her journals. Didn't know people from your world ever found their way to this one. She didn't, he said. That was just coincidence, nothing more. There was a pause. Not angry, just off. Dorothy came skipping back from Layla's stall, arms full of tangerines. Look, Ms. Layla gave me extras 'cause I'm famous now. She didn't notice the shift. She didn't need to. Children know when air has changed. As the day wound down, the market slowly emptied, booths packed up, laughter faded into the distance. The sun lowered, casting a warm amber across the square. Angela folded tablecloths methodically, her movements slow, deliberate. Jonathan helped without saying much. When the final crate was in the car, she turned to him. I don't know what you were to her, she said, voice steady. And honestly, I don't need to. He waited, but I do need to know that whatever this is, whatever we're building, it's not just a rest stop between your old life and wherever you think you're going next. She paused, eyes steady on his. I can't be someone's quiet place while they figure out where they really want to be. Her words didn't carry anger. They carried weight, truth, history. I'm not leaving, Jonathan said. Angela nodded once. I've heard people say that before. I'm not them. She didn't smile. Her voice was quieter now. Then stay. Really stay. Not just when it's easy, not just when it's kind. With that, she opened the driver's side door. Dorothy waved from the back seat, grinning, completely unaware of the thread now stretched between the two adults outside the car. Jonathan stood in the fading light, watching them pull away. He wasn't alone because someone had walked away. He was alone because something had been asked of him. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about how to protect himself. He was thinking about how to show up. And maybe that was the first real difference between who he'd been and who he was starting to become. The gallery was quiet. It always was at this hour, just before the last light of the day crept across the front windows, warming the hardwood floors and casting a soft glow over the paintings that made them shimmer like something alive. Jonathan Bernard stood near the entrance, hands tucked into his pockets, waiting. Angela was running late. She'd said she would meet him after dropping Dorothy off at Layla's for the afternoon. It hadn't been a formal invitation, just a quiet ask, a nudge. He had something he wanted to share with her. And somehow this space, this quiet, had felt right for it. He let out a slow breath and looked down the main hallway where canvases stretched in an even line. His work, newly framed, newly finished. The wall now held a full collection, all of them recent, each one born in the still moments of early morning or the reflective hush of evenings spent walking away from Angela's front porch, carrying more than just the weight of his own thoughts. At the center hung the painting of the house, with the porch swing and the soft light above the door. But just to the right of it was something newer, something more personal. It was a portrait of Dorothy. It wasn't flawless. Her curls had come out too big, her hands not quite symmetrical, but the eyes held. The eyes carried something true, wide, wondering, full of belief that hadn't been erased by experience, hope that stayed, even when it had every reason not to. The door opened behind him. Angela stepped inside, brushing strands of hair from her face, her cheeks flushed from the cold. "Sorry," she said, catching her breath. "Traffic backed up near the bridge." "No rush." He offered a soft smile. "Thanks for coming." She glanced around the gallery. "I haven't been here since the fundraiser last fall. It feels different now." He gave her a moment, then tilted his head toward the hallway. She followed his gaze. As her eyes moved down the line of canvases, mountains, a quiet trail through trees, a silhouette of a man holding a child's hand, she stopped at the portrait, her lips parted, but no words came. "I wasn't going to hang that one," Jonathan said quietly, but it felt dishonest to keep it hidden. Angela took a few steps closer. She didn't touch the frame. Her eyes were locked on the image. "That's her," she whispered. "That's really her." "I see her," he said, in every brush stroke. She turned toward him slowly. Her voice, when it came, was steady but searching. "Why are you showing me this now?" "Because you need to know something." She waited. "I meant what I said at the market. I'm not leaving. But I also know words aren't enough anymore. You've lived through too much to believe in good intentions just because they're spoken with kindness." He stepped toward her, measured and unhurried. "I painted these because they're what I see when I close my eyes now. Not cities. Not boardrooms, not airports or headlines." He stopped just short of her. "I see you. I see her. I see a life I didn't know I was allowed to want." Angela stood still, her hands at her sides, fingers curled tight. Her throat moved as she swallowed hard. "And then she showed me I was," he said, his voice quieter now. "Dorothy." With that hug, her eyes welled. She didn't look away. "I've built companies worth more than I care to admit," he continued, "but none of it taught me how to be present. That part, you and she are teaching me." He looked down for a moment, then back up. "I know Valerie's visit stirred up something. I don't blame you for pulling back, but I don't want to be another echo of someone who almost meant it. I want to be here, even when it's hard, especially then." A tear slipped down Angela's cheek. She didn't wipe it away. "You paint her like she's sacred," she said softly. "She is." She looked back at the portrait, then back at him. "And me?" Jonathan's voice cracked. "You're the reason I remembered how to feel." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was gentle. It held space. Finally, Angela spoke. "She drew something this morning." Jonathan's brow lifted slightly. "Yeah?" "She said it's her favorite one yet." Angela reached into her coat and unfolded a sheet of paper. She handed it to him carefully. 3 figures. One tall, one medium, one small. They stood beneath a tree, and above their heads, the word family floated in bright, playful letters. In the corner, a small red heart. Inside it, one word: staying. Jonathan stared at it. His chest tightened. He tried to speak, but couldn't. "She asked me if we were going to keep you," Angela said, watching his face. "Like you were a stray we were hoping no one would come back for." He let out a shaky breath, part laugh, part something deeper. "And what did you say?" Angela reached for his hand. Her grip was warm. "Sure. I told her, if he stays, we don't need anyone else to come." Jonathan's breath caught. For a moment, neither of them moved. The weight of the moment was too honest to rush past. Then she leaned in. No fanfare, no hesitation, just a kiss. Soft, real, right there in the gallery between paintings and quiet light and the drawing she had tucked inside his hand. When they pulled back, neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. The truth had already found its voice. The scent of cinnamon and rain still lingered in the air as the last traces of sunlight stretched across the sky. At the edge of the community garden, the wind tugged gently at Angela's scarf as she stood with her arms crossed, watching Dorothy paint on an old wooden fence panel. The mural was half finished. Swirls of red and yellow curved around a small house, and just above it, a tiny bird with its wings spread wide. "It's our family's sky," Angela murmured. She hadn't noticed Jonathan walk up beside her until he spoke. "She's building a world she wants to live in." Angela nodded, eyes still on her daughter. "I worry sometimes it's a world I can't give her." There was a pause between them, not tense, just careful. Jonathan turned to her. "Where's that coming from?" Angela took a breath. "Her teacher called me today." He stiffened just slightly. "Is she okay?" "She's fine." Angela said. It wasn't about behavior. It was about a form I forgot to sign. Emergency contacts. Parent updates. She turned to him. She told her teacher she has 2 homes now, mine and yours. Jonathan blinked. She gave them your address, Angela said. Told them that if I ever couldn't come, they should call you. He tried to answer, but couldn't find the words. I didn't tell her to do that, she added. She just chose you. His voice, when it came, was soft. And that scares you? Yes, Angela said, because it's not pretend anymore. It's not just Sunday pancakes and shared afternoons. It's trust. It's real. I know, he said quietly. And if you leave, I'm not leaving, he cut in. His voice was firmer this time. Jonathan, you say that like it's a decision people make and then undo, she said. And I know. People do. He stepped back slightly. The words landed harder than she intended. She saw it. I'm sorry, she said quickly. That wasn't fair. This is the point where things usually fall apart, where people pull away. His voice broke. It is too much. That's what makes it matter. He looked toward the garden again. Dorothy was painting now with both hands, brush strokes, wild and joyful. There's something I haven't told you, he said, about Claire. Angela didn't press, but she stayed. We tried for years, he began. Fertility treatments, hope, more hope, then loss, over and over. And when we stopped trying, we stopped talking. I dove into work, she dove into painting. We stopped seeing each other. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. The day she died, we'd barely spoken in weeks. I was overseas giving a keynote in Berlin. She went out for a walk, just a walk. He paused. When they called me, I didn't believe it. I couldn't. Not like that. Not with that kind of space between us. Angela's eyes filled, but she didn't look away. I've spent every day since wondering how much of that distance was mine to carry, and whether I could ever be someone who stayed close enough to matter, close enough to not miss it. Without thinking, she reached for his hand. He took it. I don't want to miss anything anymore, he said. Not laughter, not art on a fence, not the people who make me feel like I belong. I'm not running from something anymore. I'm running toward it, toward you. And if you'll have me, I'll keep showing up, all of it. Pancakes, roof leaks, hard days, good ones. Angela squeezed his hand gently. She nodded. It wasn't dramatic. It was solid. Okay, she said. Then let's stay, one day at a time. Dorothy turned then, her paint-streaked hands raised high. Look, I finished the wings. They walked toward her as the sun dipped low behind them. The sky was lit in streaks of orange and pink. The mural on the fence pulsed with life. And for the first time in a very long time, none of them were waiting for life to begin. They were already in it. Messy, brave, and real. It began with a letter. No envelope, just a folded sheet of notebook paper left neatly on the front table of the ceramic studio. Angela's name was written in big, careful letters across the top, and hearts were drawn in each corner. Small, uneven, unmistakably Dorothy's. Angela Harper paused as soon as she saw it, fingers still streaked with clay. She reached for the letter, smoothed the creases slowly, and read in silence while afternoon light spilled across the studio floor, turning dust into gold. Dear Mommy, if you say yes, I think we should invite Mr. Warm to my birthday. He makes you smile like hot chocolate does, and I think he needs cake. Love, Dorothy. Angela didn't smile. Not at first. Instead, she pressed the paper to her chest and closed her eyes. She hadn't said anything to Dorothy about the party she'd been quietly planning for weeks. A simple backyard gathering. Music. Cookies. Maybe a puppet show. Nothing big. Just turning 9 with the people who mattered. But somehow, Dorothy always knew before Angela could find the words. And somehow, she always knew exactly who she needed in the center of her world. By the time the next morning rolled around, Angela found herself standing in front of Jonathan Bernard's studio, the letter in one hand, the weight of uncertainty settled in the other. She hesitated before knocking, just once, quiet but sure. Jonathan opened the door a moment later, his apron dusted with flowery white from clay work, hair tousled, smile soft but uncertain. Hey, he said, voice gentle. I brought something, Angela replied. He stepped aside. She handed him the letter. His eyes scanned it slowly, once, then again. And a third time, this time reading it aloud, barely above a whisper, like the words were something sacred. "I think he needs cake." He looked up, his eyes a little shinier than before. "That might be the kindest invitation I've ever received." "She means it," Angela said. "I know." He folded the note carefully, as though it might break, and tucked it into his pocket. "I've been to a lot of parties, but I've never been invited like this. Not as the person someone actually wanted to show up." Angela tilted her head slightly. "You've been to a million galas." "That's not the same." His voice held a smile. "Nobody draws you into their heart with crayons at a gala." Their eyes held for a moment. "You'll come?" she asked. "I wouldn't miss it." The day of the party arrived under a sky streaked with sunlight and the sweet, familiar scent of cookies baking somewhere nearby. In the backyard, paper lanterns swayed gently from the trees, and a banner made of construction paper flapped above the porch, each letter hand-painted in Dorothy's careful style. Layla showed up early with a crock pot full of spiced cider and a Bluetooth speaker she claimed only played happy memories. Steve manned the grill, surprisingly focused, wearing a cupcake-shaped hat that he pretended to be annoyed by, but didn't take off. The kids played barefoot on the lawn. Dorothy, in a pink dress now streaked with grass and cake icing, led a high-speed game of tag that involved invisible fairies and a very real dog named Waffles from next door. And then Jonathan arrived. He wasn't dressed up, not really, just a soft blue sweater, well-worn jeans, and that same open smile that had started showing up more often lately. But what made Angela stop mid-step wasn't the smile. It was what he held in his hands, a small wooden box, hand-painted in gentle colors, tied with a thin ribbon. On the lid in delicate gold lettering, "Dorothy," written in a slow, careful script. "I didn't know what to get her," he said, offering it with both hands. "So I made something." Angela took the box and slowly lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in a bed of soft cloth, were set miniature sculptures, each one shaped like a moment. A tiny frog, a porch swing, a tree with 3 hearts carved into the bark, a mug of hot cocoa, a ceramic sunflower, and one final piece, a sculpture of 2 abstract figures locked in an embrace, arms curled around each other with no beginning and no end. Angela blinked hard. "She'll love it," she whispered. "She'll treasure it." "I hope so," he said quietly. They turned to watch Dorothy, now dancing beneath a shower of bubbles, laughter rising high and bright above the hum of conversation. For a while, no one spoke. There was nothing to say. The world simply felt full. Later, after the cake was gone and the impromptu dancing had turned the grass into a patchwork of bare feet and cookie crumbs, Dorothy sat cross-legged on the porch, the wooden box in her lap. She picked up each sculpture one at a time, studying it with reverence, as if the stories inside them might speak if she listened hard enough. "This one's my favorite," she said, holding up the hugging figures. "Why?" Angela asked, brushing frosting off her shirt. "Because you can't tell who's hugging who," Dorothy said. "It's just love going around." Jonathan stood behind them, quiet, taking in the moment. Angela turned toward him, her voice low. "She's giving you a piece of herself again." He nodded, his voice steady. "And this time, I'm ready." And just like that, the chapter of maybe became the beginning of yes. As the sky shifted to lavender and the lanterns above began to glow, Dorothy danced with her arms wide open beneath the trees, spinning slowly, eyes lifted to the sky. Jonathan reached for Angela's hand, and this time, there was no hesitation. Because love, when it's real, doesn't wait to be declared. It just stays. The first frost touched Willow Creek like a quiet secret. Angela stood on the front porch, wrapped in a sweater, both hands cradling a mug of chamomile tea. Her breath curled into the cold morning air, visible and slow. Across the street, the last vendor tent was being packed away, folded down until spring. Somewhere down the block, someone played guitar out a cracked window, gentle chords rising above the quiet. Inside, the house glowed with the warmth of lamplight. Dorothy sat at the kitchen table, coloring with total focus, humming to herself. Jonathan's voice drifted in from the hallway, low and amused. "I think these laces may require a degree in advanced puzzle theory," he said. Dorothy giggled. "They're secure. That's how you know they're good." Angela smiled to herself and took a sip of tea. This was their rhythm now. Mornings like this. Shared meals, art supplies on every surface. Grocery lists written in 3 different handwriting styles stuck to the fridge. It felt settled. It felt earned. But even peace, no matter how real, casts a shadow. And they could both feel it. Later that afternoon, while Dorothy was helping Layla set up her winter-themed display, Angela found herself standing in the doorway of Jonathan's studio. The space smelled like clay and old coffee, and Jonathan was seated at the work table, flipping through a stack of unopened mail. His shoulders were relaxed, but his fingers tapped absently against the edge of a letter. Angela noticed it before he did. Heavy paper. A logo printed in this corner, Whitaker Foundation, New York. He picked it up, frowned slightly, and then set it down like it might bite. "What is it?" she asked, her voice quiet but curious. He didn't look at her right away. "They want me to keynote the annual summit," he said. His voice was flat, almost careful. "Apparently, someone nominated me as a transformative legacy innovator." Angela raised her eyebrows. "That sounds impressive." "It's not," he said, his expression tight. "You don't want to go?" "It's not about wanting," he replied. "It's about what it means if I say yes." She waited. He sighed, ran a hand through his hair, and leaned back in the chair. "I'd be walking back into the world I left, shaking hands with the same people who watched me burn out and called it brilliance. I'd be stepping back onto that stage, into that skyline, into that version of myself." Angela crossed her arms gently. "Then don't go." "It's not that simple," he said. "I spent 10 years building that life, and now they want to dust it off, parade it around like I never left." She looked at him, studied him. "What do you want?" He looked at her then, really looked. "I want mornings like this. Paint on my hands. Dorothy's drawings on the fridge. You here." Angela let out a slow breath. "Then go." He turned to her, surprised. "But only if you come back," she added. "Not just to Willow Creek. To us. Because if you go to prove something to them and forget what you already proved to yourself here, then it wasn't closure. It was a rewind." He looked down at the envelope again. "I don't want to lose this." She reached out and touched his arm gently. "You won't. Not unless you forget why you built it in the first place." The moment held there. Fragile. Honest. Real. That night, Jonathan stood out on the back deck under a wide open sky full of stars. The invitation sat unopened beside him. Inside the house, Dorothy was asleep, clutching the tiny clay hedgehog he'd made for her earlier that week. Angela was curled on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, her novel half read and resting on her lap. Jonathan looked at the envelope one last time. He didn't tear it up. He didn't send in an RSVP. He simply walked back into the studio and set it on the shelf next to the very first sketch he'd drawn when he arrived in Willow Creek, the little house with the porch light glowing. Beneath it, he scribbled a note on a scrap of paper. "I already have what I was searching for. I just had to stop looking everywhere else." When he returned inside, Angela looked up from her spot on the couch. "Did you decide?" she asked. He nodded. "I'm exactly where I need to be." He reached for her hand and she didn't hesitate. Outside, the wind softened, and inside, for just a moment, everything felt whole. Thank you, truly, for staying with us until the very end of this story. It means more than words can say. If something in today's journey stirred something in you, if it reminded you of love, healing, or second chances, then this story has done its job. These aren't just stories, they're pieces of real life, of emotional stories that echo through quiet hearts and quiet moments. We'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? What part of this story stayed with you? Please feel free to share in the comments. We read every one, and if this story touched you, if it felt like something worth keeping close, we'd be so grateful if you'd like, subscribe, and stay with us for what's next. This channel exists because of your support and your compassion. Whether you're here for the millionaire stories, the audio stories, the real stories, or just something that reminds you you're not alone, thank you. Until the next story, take care of your heart. We'll see you soon.